Welcome to Poirot Stories, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings captivating mysteries to life. In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Manor, a scream pierces the stormy night. Eleanor Price lies dead, a silver box clutched in her lifeless hand. What secret did she uncover that led to her murder? Who among the elegant guests, each hiding their own lies, wields the killer's blade? Join Hercule Poirot, the master detective, as he unravels a web of deception, where a hidden heir, a poisoned vial, and a crimson clue point to a shocking truth. Will the little grey cells triumph before the storm clears, or will the murderer strike again? Dive into this gripping tale of suspense, where every detail matters, and no one is what they seem. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The late autumn sun hung low over the Devon countryside, casting a golden haze across the rolling hills and the imposing silhouette of Blackthorn Manor. The estate, a sprawling Georgian edifice of grey stone and ivy-clad walls, stood as a monument to both grandeur and secrecy. Its tall windows glinted like watchful eyes, guarding the stories of generations within its walls. On this particular October evening in 1928, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and the promise of an impending storm. The manor's gravel drive crunched under the wheels of a sleek Daimler, which deposited its sole passenger, Captain Arthur Hastings, at the grand entrance. Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, adjusted his overcoat and surveyed the scene. He had received an invitation from Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, the widowed mistress of Blackthorn Manor, requesting his presence for a weekend gathering. The invitation, penned in elegant script, had hinted at a matter of delicate importance, though it offered no specifics. Hastings, intrigued and sensing an opportunity to coax Poirot out of his recent ennui, had persuaded the great detective to join him. Poirot, however, had insisted on arriving separately, citing a need to observe the scene unencumbered. Hastings, accustomed to his friend's eccentricities, had not pressed the matter. The heavy oak door swung open, revealing a butler whose impeccable posture and impassive expression suggested a lifetime of service. "Captain Hastings, I presume," he intoned, his voice as polished as the silver tray he carried. "Lady Ashbourne awaits you in the drawing-room." Hastings followed the butler through a cavernous hall adorned with ancestral portraits, their eyes seeming to track his progress. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and fading roses, and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock echoed in the distance. The drawing-room, when he reached it, was a study in opulence. Crimson drapes, a roaring fire, and a collection of guests who turned to greet him with varying degrees of warmth. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, a tall woman in her late 50s with silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, rose to welcome him, her emerald flicker of unease. "Captain Hastings, how kind of you to join us," she said, her voice smooth but tinged with a nervous edge. "I trust your journey was pleasant?" "Quite, thank you," Hastings replied, bowing slightly, "though I confess I'm curious about the purpose of this gathering." Lady Beatrice's smile tightened. "All in good time, Captain. Allow me to introduce you to our company." The room held a small but eclectic group, each member exuding the peculiar blend of charm and guardedness that Hastings had come to associate with Poirot's cases. First was Sir Reginald Ashburn, Lady Beatrice's younger brother, a ruddy-faced man in his 40s with a booming laugh and a penchant for brandy. He was a retired colonel, recently returned from India, and his military bearing was softened only slightly by his jovial demeanour. Beside him sat his wife, Clara Ashburn, a delicate woman with porcelain skin and eyes that darted nervously about the room. She spoke little, her hands twisting a lace handkerchief as if it were her only anchor. Next was Dr. Malcolm Everett, a physician of middle age whose sharp features and piercing gaze suggested a mind accustomed to dissecting both bodies and motives. He nodded curtly at Hastings, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the arm of his chair. Beside him lounged Vivienne Laurent, a French actress whose raven hair and sultry voice had made her a darling of the London stage. Her presence at Blackthorn Manor seemed incongruous, yet her easy charm filled the room with a disarming warmth. Finally, there was Mr. Ernest Whitby, a solicitor in his early 30s, whose thin frame and wire-rimmed spectacles gave him the air of a man perpetually buried in ledgers. His deference to Lady Beatrice was almost obsequious, though his eyes betrayed a calculating intelligence. Rounding out the group was Miss Eleanor Price, Lady Beatrice's niece, a young woman of 22 with auburn curls and a defiant tilt to her chin. She sat apart, her expression one of barely concealed impatience. As Hastings exchanged pleasantries, the conversation danced around trivialities, weather, theatre, the state of the countryside, but an undercurrent of tension was palpable. Lady Beatrice's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea, and Sir Reginald's laughter rang a touch too loud. Clara Ashburn's gaze flitted towards the door, as if expecting an unwelcome arrival. Hastings, ever observant in his own right, noted these details, storing them away for Poirot's inevitable scrutiny. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under a chandelier. The meal was exquisite: roast pheasant, creamed potatoes, and a claret that Sir Reginald praised effusively. But the atmosphere grew heavier with each course. Lady Beatrice, engraved with intricate filigree, and it drew Hastings' attention for reasons he could not quite articulate. "An heirloom, is it?" he ventured, nodding toward the box. Lady Beatrice started, her fork clattering against her plate. "Oh yes," she said quickly, "a family treasure. It holds sentimental value." Her hesitation did not escape Hastings, nor did the glance she exchanged with Ernest Whitby, who promptly changed the subject to the rising cost of estate maintenance. The conversation limped along until dessert, when a sudden clap of thunder rattled the windows, signaling the storm's arrival. The room fell silent, the only sound the drumming of rain against the glass. It was then that Vivienne Laurent leaned forward, her voice low and teasing. "Lady Beatrice, you promised us an announcement this evening. Surely you won't keep us in suspense any longer." The room seemed to hold its breath. Lady Beatrice's lips parted, but before she could speak, a piercing scream echoed from the upper floors. Every head turned toward the sound, and Clara Ashbourne clutched her husband's arm, her face ashen. "Good heavens!" Sir Reginald exclaimed, rising from his chair. "What was that?" The butler, who had been hovering discreetly, stepped forward. "I shall investigate, sir," he said, but his calm demeanor did little to quell the rising panic. Hastings' pulse quickened. He had seen this before, the moment when civility unraveled and the shadow of crime loomed large. "Perhaps we should all go," he suggested, his voice steady despite the unease creeping up his spine. The group ascended the grand staircase, led by the butler's flickering lantern. The scream had come from the east wing, where the guest bedrooms were located. As they reached a heavy oak door at the end of the corridor, the butler knocked, then pushed it open. Inside, sprawled across a four-poster bed, lay Miss Eleanor Price, her auburn curls fanned out on the pillow, her eyes wide and unseeing. A thin trickle of blood stained the white linen, and a silver letter opener protruded from her chest. The room was still, save for the patter of rain and Clara Ashbourne's stifled sob. Hastings knelt beside the body, his heart sinking. Eleanor's face, so defiant at dinner, was now frozen in a mask of shock. He checked for a pulse, though he knew it was futile. "She's dead," he said quietly, rising to face the others. Vivienne Laurent gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Dr. Everett stepped forward, his professional instincts taking over, but his examination only confirmed Hastings' verdict. Sir Reginald's face reddened with rage, while Clara clung to him, trembling. Lady Beatrice stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the silver box, which Eleanor had clutched in her lifeless hand. "Who could have done this?" Ernest Whitby whispered, his voice shaking. "Haste the police," he said, "and for Hercule Poirot. He will know what to do." As the storm raged outside, the guests exchanged glances, each face a mosaic of fear, guilt, and suspicion. Blackthorn Manor, once a haven of elegance, had become a stage for murder, and Hastings knew that only Poirot's little grey cells could unravel the truth hidden within its walls. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Murder. The storm battered Blackthorn Manor with unrelenting fury, its howling winds and lashing rain sealing the estate in a cocoon of isolation. Inside, the air was thick with dread as the guests huddled in the drawing room, their faces pale under the flickering light of the chandelier. The discovery of Eleanor Price's lifeless body had shattered the veneer of civility that had cloaked the evening, and now suspicion hung over the room like a fog. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his mind racing, his eyes darting between the assembled company. The silver letter opener, stained with Eleanor's blood, and the mysterious silver box clutched in her hand lingered in his thoughts, tantalizing fragments of a puzzle he could not yet piece together. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne sat rigidly in a high-backed chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her composure, so carefully maintained during dinner, was fraying at the edges. Her lips trembled as she stared into the fire. Sir Reginald Ashbourne paced the room, his heavy footsteps echoing on the polished floor, his face flushed with a mixture of grief and fury. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, pausing to glare at no one in particular. "Eleanor, murdered under our own roof. Who would dare?" Clara Ashbourne, his wife, sat beside him, her delicate frame hunched as if to shield herself from the weight of the tragedy. Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying, darted nervously toward the door, as though expecting Eleanor's ghost to appear. Dr. Malcolm Everett stood apart, his sharp features set in a mask of professional detachment, though his fingers twitched, as if itching to dissect the situation with clinical precision. Vivienne Laurent, the actress, reclined on a chaise longue, her dark eyes gleaming with a curiosity that bordered on theatrical. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, hovered near Lady Beatrice, his spectacles glinting as he scribbled notes in a small leather-bound book, his expression one of barely concealed agitation. Hastings cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "The butler has telephoned for the police," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "They will be here as soon as the storm permits. I've also sent word." "Truth, Sir Reginald. I assure you his presence will be invaluable." Lady Beatrice stirred, her voice soft but strained. "Captain Hastings, do you truly believe this tragedy can be explained? Eleanor was so young, so full of life. Who could have wished her harm?" Her words hung in the air, unanswered, as each guest avoided her gaze. Hastings noted the silence, the way Vivian's lips curved slightly, as if suppressing a thought, and the way Whitby's pen paused mid-stroke. The room was a tapestry of secrets, and he longed for Poirot's keen eye to unravel its threads. A sharp rap at the door broke the tension. The butler entered, his face ashen. "Captain Hastings, the telephone lines are down. The storm has severed the connection. The police cannot be reached until morning at the earliest." A murmur of unease rippled through the group.
Clara Ashbourne let out a small whimper, and Sir Reginald swore under his breath. Hastings frowned, his mind turning to the practicalities. "Then we must secure the scene," he said firmly. "No one is to enter Miss Price's room until Poirot or the police arrive. We must preserve every detail." Dr. Everett nodded approvingly. "A sensible precaution, Captain. I've already examined the body. Death was instantaneous, caused by a single stab wound to the heart. The letter opener was the weapon, no doubt." "And the silver box?" Hastings asked, his eyes narrowing. "Did you notice it in her hand?" Everett hesitated, his gaze flickering toward Lady Beatrice. "Yes, I saw it. It appeared to be tightly clutched, as if she were protecting it or hiding it." Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her throat. "That box," she whispered. It's nothing of consequence. A trinket, really." Her words rang hollow, and Hastings made a mental note to press Poirot on the matter. Before he could respond, the door opened again, and a small, impeccably dressed figure stepped into the room. Hercule Poirot, his mustache waxed to perfection, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the mud outside, surveyed the scene with bright, inquisitive eyes. His presence, though diminutive, commanded immediate attention, and the room fell silent. "Mon ami Hastings!" Poirot exclaimed, his voice warm but laced with a hint of reproach. "You find yourself once again in the midst of tragedy, n'est-ce pas? And yet you did not wait for Poirot before plunging into the fray." Hastings flushed, but his relief was palpable. "Poirot, thank heavens you're here. Miss Eleanor Price has been murdered, stabbed in her room." The eyes glistening.
Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. This is a terrible night. Poirot's gaze swept the room, taking in each guest with the precision of a watchmaker. A terrible night, oui, but also a most revealing one. Murder, mes amis, is never a random act. It is a story, written in the choices and secrets of those present. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall read it. He moved to the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. First, I must see the scene of the crime. Captain Hastings, you will accompany me. The rest of you, s'il vous plaît, remain here. Do not discuss the matter among yourselves. The mind, it is a delicate instrument, and memory can be persuaded. Sir Reginald bristled, but Poirot's authority was undeniable. Hastings led the way to the east wing, where Eleanor's body still lay. The room was as they had left it. The blood-stained bed, the letter opener, and the silver box, now resting on a side table where Dr. Everett had placed it. Poirot's eyes darted over every detail, his movements precise and deliberate. He examined the body without touching it, noting the angle of the wound, the position of Eleanor's hands, and the expression frozen on her face. "Curieux," he murmured, bending to inspect the letter opener. "The weapon is elegant, no? And yet so precise. A single thrust, directly to the heart. This was no act of passion, Hastings. This was calculated." He turned his attention to the silver box, lifting it carefully with a gloved hand. Its lid was locked, but a faint rattle suggested something inside. "This box," he said softly. "It is at the heart of our mystery, I think. Why did Mademoiselle Price hold it so tightly in death?" Hastings frowned. Lady Beatrice called it a family heirloom, but she was evasive. Could it contain something valuable? "Or something dangerous?" Poirot replied, his eyes narrowing. He set the box down and surveyed the room again, noting the open window, its curtains fluttering in the storm.
The window, Hastings. It is unlatched, yet the storm rages outside. Why would it be open on such a night? Perhaps the murderer escaped that way, Hastings suggested. Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. The ground outside is soft from rain. There would be footprints, and I see none. No, the window is a distraction, or perhaps a clue to something else entirely. They returned to the drawing room where the guests waited in uneasy silence. Poirot addressed them with calm authority. Mesdames et messieurs, a murder has been committed, and the truth lies among us. I shall need to speak with each of you privately, but first, a question. Who last saw?
Agitated, you say? Merci, Mademoiselle Laurent. That is most interesting. As the night deepened, Hastings watched his friend's mind at work, piecing together the fragments of a crime that had only just begun to reveal its shape. The storm outside was a mere echo of the tempest brewing within Blackthorn Manor, and Hastings knew that Poirot's little gray cells were already turning, ready to unravel the secrets that lay hidden in the shadows. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Poirot's Method. The storm continued its relentless assault on Blackthorn Manor, the wind howling like a chorus of restless spirits. Inside, the drawing room was a tableau of strained faces, each guest caught in their own private turmoil as they awaited Hercule Poirot's next move. The flickering firelight cast long shadows, amplifying the sense of unease that had settled over the group since Eleanor Price's murder. Captain Hastings stood near the window, his gaze alternating between the rain-slashed darkness outside and the peculiar assembly within. He felt the familiar stir of anticipation, knowing that Poirot's arrival marked the beginning of a meticulous unraveling of the truth. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, neat figure radiating an authority that belied his stature. His eyes, sharp and inquisitive, moved from face to face, as if reading the secrets etched in their expressions. His mustache twitched slightly, a telltale sign that his little gray cells were already at work. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice calm but commanding. A crime has been committed, and it is my intention to bring clarity to this darkness. But first, I must understand the order of events. Captain Hastings, mon ami, will assist me in recording your accounts. We begin with the timeline of this evening. Hastings produced a small notebook, ready to jot down every detail. Poirot's insistence on precision was legendary, and Hastings knew that even the smallest discrepancy could prove pivotal. Let us establish, Poirot continued, where each of you was between 8 o'clock, when dinner concluded, and 9 o'clock, when the scream was heard. Lady Beatrice Ashburn spoke first, her voice steady but tinged with strain. After dinner, I retired to my study to review some correspondence. I was there until the scream brought me to the hall. Her eyes flickered toward the silver box, now resting on a side table under Poirot's watchful gaze, and Hastings noted the faint tremor in her hands. Sir Reginald Ashburn cleared his throat, his face still flushed from indignation or brandy. I was in the billiard room with Dr. Everett. We played a game or two, didn't we, Everett? He glanced at the doctor for confirmation, his tone almost defiant. Dr. Malcolm Everett nodded, his sharp features impassive. Indeed, we were together from 8 until the scream. The East Wing, where it happened. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. And you heard nothing unusual during this time? No footsteps, no voices. Nothing, Everett replied, his voice clipped. The storm was loud enough to drown out most sounds. Clara Ashburn, her lace handkerchief now a crumpled ball in her hands, spoke softly. I was in the library, reading. I needed some quiet after dinner. I didn't see or hear anything until the scream. Poirot turned to Vivian Laurent, whose dark eyes met his with a hint of amusement.
as if she found the interrogation a performance to be savored. "And you, Mademoiselle Laurent, where did your evening take you?" "I wandered," she said, her French accent lilting. "The manor is so grand, I couldn't resist exploring. I was in the conservatory, admiring the orchids, until I heard the scream and joined the others." Hastings scribbled diligently, noting the vagueness of her response. Poirot, however, merely nodded, his expression unreadable. "And Monsieur Whitby?" he asked, turning to the solicitor. Ernest Whitby adjusted his spectacles, his thin fingers fidgeting with his notebook. "I was in my room, working on some legal documents for Lady Beatrice. I came down when I heard the commotion." Poirot's gaze lingered on Whitby, as if weighing the truth of his words. "Merci," he said at last. "This gives us a foundation. Now, I must see the room again, and I shall require your permission, Madame Ashburn, to examine the silver box." Lady Beatrice stiffened, her lips parting as if to protest, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Whatever you need." Poirot and Hastings returned to Eleanor's room, the air within now heavy with the scent of blood and rain. The body remained untouched, awaiting the police, but Poirot's focus was on the details. He examined the silver box again, noting its intricate lock and the faint scratches around the keyhole, as if someone had tried to force it open. "This box, Hastings," he murmured. "It is not merely an heirloom. It holds a secret that someone was willing to kill for." He moved to the open window, his gloved fingers tracing the latch. "The window, it troubles me. It was unlatched, yet the storm would make escape impossible. And see here." He pointed to a small smear of mud on the sill, barely noticeable. "This suggests someone entered or exited, but the absence of footprints outside is curious." Hastings frowned. "Could the mud have come from earlier, before the rain?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone skeptical. "But the mind of Poirot does not accept coincidence so readily. We must consider every possibility." They returned to the drawing room, where Poirot began his interviews in earnest. He started with Lady Beatrice, inviting her to the library for privacy. Hastings stood by, notebook in hand, as Poirot—
"Madame, tell me of Mademoiselle Price. She was your niece, oui? What brought her to Blackthorn Manor?" Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace. "Eleanor was spirited. She came to stay with me after a disagreement with her parents in London. She wanted independence, and I thought a few weeks here might calm her." "And was she calm?" Poirot pressed, his eyes fixed on her. "She was restless," Lady Beatrice admitted. "She spoke often of her ambitions, of breaking free from family expectations. She was particularly interested in the history of Blackthorn Manor and its treasures." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Treasures, madame?" "Such as the silver box." Lady Beatrice flushed. "The box is a family relic, nothing more. It contains personal mementos. Eleanor was curious about it, but I told her it was of no consequence." Poirot nodded, but his silence spoke volumes. He dismissed Lady Beatrice and called for Sir Reginald, whose bluster filled the library like a storm of its own. "This is preposterous," he declared. "Eleanor was a headstrong girl, but who would want to kill her?" "It must be an outsider, some vagrant caught in the storm." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, monsieur, the storm makes such an intrusion unlikely. Tell me, what was your relationship with your niece?" Sir Reginald's face reddened further. "She was a thorn in my side, always questioning my decisions about the estate. She had no respect for tradition." "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "And where exactly were you at 8:30, when Mademoiselle Price retired to her room. "In the billiard room, as I said," Sir Reginald snapped. "Everett can vouch for me." The interviews continued, each guest revealing fragments of their connection to Eleanor. Clara Ashbourne spoke of Eleanor's kindness, but admitted to feeling intimidated by her boldness. Dr. Everett described her as a patient, healthy but prone to nervous excitement. Vivian Laurent claimed a passing acquaintance, though her knowing smile suggested more. Ernest Whitby, the last to be questioned, was evasive, insisting he barely knew Eleanor beyond her role as Lady Beatrice's niece. As the clock struck midnight, Poirot dismissed the group, instructing them to remain in their rooms until morning. Alone with Hastings, he paced the library, his mind a whirlwind of thought. "Hastings, mon ami, this is a puzzle of many pieces. The silver box, the open window, the mud on the sill. These are not accidents. And the alibis, random act. It was a carefully orchestrated crime. And only Poirot's methodical genius could peel back the layers of deception." The night stretched on, and Hastings knew that the morning would bring new revelations, each one a step closer to the truth. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The storm had not relented by the time morning broke over Blackthorn Manor, its grey light filtering through heavy clouds and casting a pall over the estate. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, but the roads remained impassable, trapping the inhabitants in a crucible of suspicion and grief. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wool and stale coffee, and the drawing-room, where the guests had gathered once more, felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his notebook open, his eyes scanning the group for any sign of weakness. Hercule Poirot, however, was the calm at the centre of the storm, his neat figure seated in an armchair, his hands folded over his waistcoat, his eyes alight with the quiet intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. Poirot had spent the early hours revisiting Eleanor Price's room, examining every detail with a precision that Hastings found both admirable and unnerving. Now, as the clock struck 10, he addressed the assembled company with his characteristic blend of courtesy and authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "the night has given us time to reflect, but it is the day that will bring clarity. A young woman is dead, and the truth of her murder lies among us. I shall continue my inquiries, and I ask for your cooperation. The smallest detail, it may be the key to the puzzle." Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, her face pale but composed, nodded. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. We all want justice for Eleanor." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement, though Hastings noted the unease in Clara Ashbourne's eyes, and the way Ernest Whitby's fingers tightened around his pen. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, standing by the fireplace, looked as though he might explode. "Justice," he barked. "What we need is action, not endless questions. The police will sort this out when they arrive." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as mild amusement. "The police, monsieur, will do their duty, but it is the mind of Poirot that will uncover the truth. Now, let us proceed. I wish to speak of Mademoiselle Price's movements last evening. Who saw her after dinner, before the scream?" A heavy silence fell. Vivienne Laurent, her dark hair swept into an elegant knot, leaned forward, her voice smooth as velvet.
A faint smile. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I'm an actress, not a nursemaid. Eleanor was not my concern." Her flippancy drew a sharp glance from Lady Beatrice, but Poirot merely nodded. "And you, Monsieur Whitby, you were in your room, you said, working on documents. Did you hear or see anything unusual?" Whitby adjusted his spectacles, his thin face betraying a flicker of nervousness. "Nothing, Monsieur Poirot. My room is on the west wing, far from Eleanor's. I was engrossed in my work." Poirot's gaze lingered on the solicitor, as if testing the weight of his words. "And yet you were quick to join the others when the scream was heard. Your room is not so far as you suggest, no?" Whitby flushed. I have sharp hearing. The scream was piercing." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, his tone unreadable. He turned to Dr. Everett, whose cool detachment seemed unshaken. "Monsieur le Docteur, you were in the billiard room with Sir Reginald. Did you notice anything about Mademoiselle Price at dinner? Her demeanor, perhaps?" Everett's fingers ceased their habitual tapping. "She was animated, as always. Eleanor had a fiery spirit, but I sensed a certain preoccupation. She kept glancing at the silver box on the table." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The silver box, oui. It draws much attention, this little object. Tell me, Madame Ashbourne, why did Mademoiselle Price take it to her room?" Lady Beatrice's hands clenched in her lap. I don't know. She must have taken it without my permission. As I said, it's a family heirloom, of sentimental value only." Poirot's smile was polite but probing. "Sentimental, perhaps, but valuable enough to die for?" "We shall see," Hastings scribbled furiously, noting the tension in Lady Beatrice's posture, and the way Sir Reginald's jaw tightened at the mention of the box. Poirot, undeterred, shifted his focus. "Let us reconstruct the evening. Dinner ended at 8. Mademoiselle Price retired to her room shortly after. The scream was heard at 9. This leaves an hour unaccounted for. I wish to know what each of you did in that time, in precise detail." The interviews resumed in the library, one by one, with Hastings recording every word. Clara Ashbourne, her voice barely above a whisper, described her time in the library, reading a novel by candlelight. "I heard nothing," she insisted, though her trembling hands suggested otherwise. Sir Reginald and Dr. Everett reiterated their billiard game, their accounts aligning almost too perfectly. Vivienne Laurent's tale of wandering the conservatory grew more elaborate, her descriptions of the orchids almost poetic. Yet Hastings sensed a rehearsed quality to her words. Ernest Whitby, when pressed, admitted to leaving his room briefly to fetch a glass of water from the kitchen. A detail he had omitted
Grew sharper, his tone deceptively gentle. "And yet, Monsieur Whitby, the kitchen is near the east wing. Did you pass Mademoiselle Price's room on your way?"
Whitby's eyes widened behind his spectacles. "No! I mean, I took the back stairs. I didn't go near her room." Poirot nodded, but his silence was heavy with implication. When the interviews concluded, he and Hastings returned to Eleanor's room for a third examination. Poirot's attention was drawn to the silver box once more. He produced a small magnifying glass and studied the scratches around the lock. "These marks, Hastings," he said softly. "They are recent. Someone tried to open this box, perhaps in haste." He moved to the bed, examining the position of Eleanor's body. "The wound. It is precise, directly to the heart. The killer knew exactly where to strike. This suggests knowledge, perhaps medical, perhaps simply practiced." Hastings frowned. "You suspect Dr. Everett?" "I suspect no one, mon ami, and everyone. But the doctor's composure is interesting, as is Madame Ashbourne's reticence about the box." Poirot's gaze fell on a small detail Hastings had overlooked. A single auburn hair caught in the latch of the window. "Curieux," he murmured.
carefully extracting it with tweezers. This hair. It is Mademoiselle Price's, no doubt. But why is it here, on the window latch? Perhaps she opened the window herself? Hastings suggested. Perhaps, Poirot said, but his tone suggested doubt. Or perhaps someone wishes us to believe she did. They returned to the drawing room, where Poirot addressed the group once more. I have observed much, but the picture is not yet complete. I ask each of you to consider your actions last night. If you have withheld anything, however small, now is the time to speak, the truth. It cannot hide forever. Within, the guests exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Sir Reginald's bluster had faded, replaced by a brooding silence. Clara's handkerchief was now a shredded ruin. Vivian's smile was gone, her eyes watchful. Whitby's pen scratched nervously, and Dr. Everett's gaze remained fixed on Poirot, as if measuring his opponent. As the morning wore on, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery pressing heavier. The silver box, the open window, the precise stab wound, each was a thread in a tapestry of deception. Poirot, however, seemed almost serene, his mind weaving those threads into a pattern only he could see. "Patience, Hastings," he whispered as they left the room.
Rain by midday, cloaking Blackthorn Manor in a grey veil that mirrored the mood within. The drawing room, once a haven of elegance, now felt like a stage where each guest played a carefully rehearsed role. Captain Hastings stood near the fireplace, his notebook filled with meticulous entries, though he sensed the truth was slipping through the cracks of their alibis. Hercule Poirot, seated in a high-backed chair, surveyed the assembled company with the calm precision of a watchmaker, his eyes glinting with the promise of revelation. The murder of Eleanor Price had cast a shadow over the manor, and now, as the morning gave way to afternoon, Poirot's methodical probing was beginning to stir the waters of deception. The guests, summoned once more, sat in uneasy silence. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne's composure was fraying, her fingers twisting the pearls at her throat. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's bluster had subsided into a brooding scowl, his brandy glass untouched. Clara Ashbourne's eyes were red-rimmed, her handkerchief a sodden wreck. Dr. Malcolm Everett maintained his clinical detachment, though his fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the arm of his chair. Vivian Laurent, the actress, exuded a studied nonchalance, her dark eyes flickering with amusement or unease. Hastings could not decide which. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, clutched his notebook as if it were a shield, his spectacles glinting nervously in the firelight. Poirot rose, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice smooth but laced with authority. "We have established the timeline of last night. But timelines, they are only the skeleton of truth. The flesh lies in the motives, the secrets, the contradictions. Today, we shall uncover what lies beneath your words." Sir Reginald bristled. "This is absurd, Poirot. You're treating us like criminals. Eleanor was my niece, damn it. I want her killer found, not my character dissected." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of mild amusement. "Monsieur, the character of each person here is a piece of the puzzle. The murderer does not wear a sign, no? They hide among the innocent, and it is my task to unmask them." He turned to the group, his gaze settling on Dr. Everett. "Monsieur le Docteur, you have confirmed the cause of death. A single stab wound to the heart, precise and fatal. Tell me, in your professional opinion, could such a wound be inflicted by anyone, or does it require skill?" Everett's eyes narrowed slightly, as if sensing a trap. "It requires some knowledge of anatomy," he said carefully. "The heart is a small target, and the letter opener was driven with force and accuracy. A layman might have struck bone or missed entirely." "Interesting," Poirot murmured, his eyes flicking to Sir Reginald, whose military background included training in close combat. "And you, Monsieur Ashbourne, you have experience with weapons, oui?"
A soldier's precision, perhaps? Sir Reginald's face reddened. Are you accusing me, Poirot? I was in the billiard room, as Everett said. We were together the whole time. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming but firm. I accuse no one, monsieur. I merely observe. But let us consider another detail, the silver box. Madame Ashburn, you insist it is a mere heirloom, yet Mademoiselle Price died clutching it. Why? Lady Beatrice's lips parted, but no sound came. After a moment, she said, Eleanor was curious. She must have taken it from the dining room. I don't know why Poirot's eyes gleamed. Curious, oui. And yet, the box is locked, and the scratches around the keyhole suggest someone tried to force it open. Was it Mademoiselle Price? Or someone else? A murmur rippled through the group, and Hastings noted Clara Ashburn's sudden intake of breath. Poirot's questions were like pebbles dropped into a still pond, their ripples exposing hidden currents. He turned to Vivienne Laurent, whose smile was now a touch too bright. Mademoiselle, you described Mademoiselle Price as agitated at dinner. Did she speak to you of this box, perhaps? Vivienne's laugh was light, almost musical. No, Monsieur Poirot. Eleanor and I were not confidants. She was a charming girl, but her concerns were her own. Poirot nodded, but his silence was heavy with skepticism. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, felt a growing suspicion that Vivienne's charm was a mask for something deeper. Poirot's next move was to address Ernest Whitby, whose nervous fidgeting had intensified. Monsieur Whitby, you were working on documents for Madame Ashburn. Were these related to the estate, or perhaps to Mademoiselle Price? Whitby's pen stilled, his face paling. They were routine matters, estate finances, nothing more. And yet, Poirot said softly, you left your room to fetch water, passing near the east wing. Did you see or hear anything that might aid us? Whitby's eyes darted to Lady Beatrice, then back to Poirot. Nothing, monsieur. I swear it. Poirot's gaze lingered, but he moved on, addressing the group as a whole. The police will arrive when the road's clear, but until then, I must ask you to remain vigilant. Do not leave the manor, and do not disturb Mademoiselle Price's room. The clues, they are delicate, and they must not be tampered with. As the guests dispersed, Poirot beckoned Hastings to the library, where they could speak privately. Hastings, mon ami, he said, pacing the room, we are surrounded by red herrings. The alibis, they are too neat. And the box, it is the key. But why was it in Mademoiselle Price's possession? And why the open window, with no footprints outside? Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. Sir Reginald and Dr.
Don't you think?
Oui, Poirot agreed, his eyes narrowing. But suspicion is not enough. We must find the contradiction, the detail that does not fit. Let us return to the room. They made their way to Eleanor's bedroom, where the air was heavy with the scent of tragedy. Poirot examined the silver box again, his magnifying glass tracing the scratches around the lock. These marks, he said, they are not random. Someone tried to open this box, perhaps in haste, perhaps in desperation. He moved to the window, where the auburn hair still clung to the latch. This hair, Hastings, it is Mademoiselle Price's, but its placement is curious. If she opened the window, why is the hair caught in the latch? It suggests struggle, perhaps, or staging. Hastings' eyes widened. You think the scene was arranged to mislead us? Précisément, Poirot said. The murderer wishes us to believe in an outsider, a phantom intruder. But the truth, it is closer to home. They returned to the drawing room, where Poirot requested the manor's floor plan from the butler. The document, a detailed map of Blackthorn Manor, revealed the proximity of the guest rooms, the back stairs, and the conservatory. Poirot studied it intently, his finger tracing the path from the kitchen to the east wing. Monsieur Whitby's errand, he murmured. It places him near the scene.
And Mademoiselle Laurent's wanderings, too vague, too convenient. As the afternoon wore on, a new piece of evidence emerged. The butler, clearing the dining room, discovered a crumpled note beneath the table, near where Eleanor had sat. He presented it to Poirot, who unfolded it with care. The note, written in Eleanor's hand, read, "Meet me at 8:30. We must settle this tonight." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This, Hastings, is a spark in the darkness." Mademoiselle Price had an appointment, one that led to her death. But with whom? The note sent a ripple of tension through the group when Poirot shared its contents. Each guest denied knowledge of the meeting, but their denials were tinged with unease. Sir Reginald's scowl deepened. Clara's hands trembled, and Vivienne's smile faltered. Poirot, however, remained serene, his mind weaving the threads of evidence into a pattern only he could see. As the rain continued to fall, Hastings felt the mystery tightening its grip. The silver box, the open window, the note, they were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to a calculated crime. Poirot's questions had exposed the first cracks in the guests' facades, and Hastings knew that the red herrings were only the beginning. The truth, as always, lay in the details, and Poirot's little grey cells were poised to uncover it. 6.
Like a chessboard, where each guest was a piece in a game only Hercule Poirot understood. Captain Hastings stood by the mantel, his notebook brimming with observations, though the weight of the mystery pressed heavily on his mind. The crumpled note found under the dining table, "Meet me at 8:30. We must settle this tonight," had ignited fresh suspicion. And the silver box, still locked and inscrutable, loomed as a silent witness to Eleanor Price's murder. Poirot, seated with his hands folded neatly over his waistcoat, surveyed the assembled company with eyes that missed nothing, his moustache twitching as his little grey cells pieced together the puzzle. The guests, summoned yet again, sat in a tense semicircle. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne's face was a mask of grief, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's earlier bluster had given way to a sullen silence, his hands clenched into fists. Clara Ashbourne, pale and trembling, clutched a fresh handkerchief, her gaze fixed on the floor. Dr. Malcolm Everett maintained his clinical composure, though his fingers betrayed a faint restlessness. Vivienne Laurent, the actress, lounged with an air of detached amusement, her dark eyes darting between Poirot and the others. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, scribbled in his notebook, his spectacles glinting as if to shield his thoughts. Poirot rose, his small frame radiating authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice precise and measured. "We stand at a crossroads in our investigation. The note found under the table tells us Mademoiselle Price had a rendezvous, one that led to her death. But with whom? And why? Today, we shall examine the details, the small things that speak louder than words." He held up the crumpled note, its edges worn as if handled repeatedly. "This note, it is in Mademoiselle Price's hand, oui? But its tone is urgent, almost commanding. We must settle this tonight." What was to be settled? And why did no one admit to this meeting? Sir Reginald snorted, breaking the silence. "It's obvious, Poirot. Some outsider crept in, killed her, and took off. The note could be about anything. A lover? A debt? Who knows?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "An outsider, monsieur. Yet the storm rages. The ground is soft, and there are no footprints. No, the answer lies within these walls. Let us consider the silver box, which Mademoiselle Price held so tightly in death. Madame Ashbourne, you have called it an heirloom, but I ask again, what does it contain?"
Lady Beatrice's lips parted, then closed. "I've told you, Monsieur Poirot. It's a family relic. It holds letters, mementos."
Husband. Poirot, ever observant, turned to her. "Madame Ashburn, you seem distressed. Did you know of Mademoiselle Price's interest in the box?" Clara's voice was barely audible. She mentioned it once, at tea. She said it was beautiful, that it must hold something important. I thought she was just curious." "Curious," Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. "A dangerous curiosity, perhaps." He shifted his attention to the room's layout, producing the manor's floor plan. "Let us revisit the timeline. Dinner ended at 8. Mademoiselle Price retired to her room. The scream was heard at 9. In that hour, someone met her, and someone killed her. Monsieur Whitby, you were near the East Wing, fetching water. Did you see anyone else?" Whitby's face paled, his fingers tightening around his pen. "No, Monsieur Poirot. The corridor was empty." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "the back stairs are narrow, the corridor dimly lit. It is easy to miss a shadow, no?" Whitby's silence was answer enough, and Poirot moved on, his gaze settling on Dr. Everett. "Monsieur le Docteur, you and Sir Reginald were in the billiard room. But tell me, did you leave at any point? Perhaps to fetch a drink?" Everett's eyes narrowed. "No, Monsieur Poirot. We played continuously. The billiard room has its own decanter." "Précisément," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet, the decanter was untouched when I examined it this morning. Curious, for two men enjoying a game." Sir Reginald's face reddened. "Are you calling me a liar, Poirot?" "I call no one a liar," Poirot replied, "but I observe inconsistencies. And inconsistencies, they lead to truth." Poirot excused the group, asking them to remain in the manor, and beckoned Hastings to Eleanor's room for another examination. The air was heavy with the scent of blood and rain, and the silver box sat on the side table, its presence almost accusatory. Poirot knelt by the bed, his magnifying glass glinting as he studied the letter opener still embedded in Eleanor's chest. "The angle of the wound, Hastings," he murmured. "It is precise, but the force suggests anger or fear." The killer stood close, face to face. He moved to the window, where the auburn hair clung to the latch. "This hair, it is a clue, but not as it seems. It was placed here, I think, to suggest Mademoiselle Price opened the window. But why stage such a scene?" Hastings frowned. "To make us think an outsider entered, perhaps," Poirot said, "or to distract from the true path of the route." They connect the kitchen to the East Wing, near Mademoiselle Price's room. Monsieur Whitby's errand places him close, but so does Mademoiselle Laurent's wandering, and the billiard room. It is not so far as Sir Reginald claims. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered, his face grave. "Monsieur Poirot, I found this in the conservatory, hidden among the orchids." He held out a small key, its surface tarnished but ornate, matching the design of the silver box. Poirot's eyes lit up. "Magnifique! This, Hastings, is the detail we sought. The key to the box, hidden where Mademoiselle Laurent claimed to be. Coincidence? I think not." He dismissed the butler and examined the key, turning it over in his gloved hands. "This key, it unlocks more than the box. It unlocks a motive. We must test it, but carefully." Poirot and Hastings returned to the drawing room, where the guests were gathered. Poirot held up the key, his voice calm but commanding. "This was found in the conservatory. Does anyone recognize it?" A collective silence followed,
broken only by Vivienne Laurent's sharp intake of breath. I've never seen it before, she said, her voice less steady than before. Lady Beatrice's face drained of color. That's the key to the box, she whispered. It was lost years ago. How did it end up there? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. That, madame, is what we shall discover. For now I ask you all to reflect. The truth is near, and it will not be kind to those who hide it. As the guests dispersed, Hastings felt the mystery tightening its grip. The key, the scuff mark, the note, they were threads in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was weaving them with relentless precision. The red herrings were falling away, revealing a pattern that pointed to a calculated crime. Hastings knew that Poirot's next move would bring them closer to the truth, and the manor, steeped in secrets, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The rain had settled into a monotonous patter against the windows of Blackthorn Manor, its rhythm a somber counterpoint to the rising tension within. The afternoon light, dim and gray, cast long shadows across the drawing room, where the guests sat in a state of uneasy anticipation. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his notebook now a thick record of alibis, contradictions, and clues, though the truth remained tantalizingly out of reach. The discovery of the key to the silver box, hidden among the conservatory's orchids, had shifted the atmosphere, and Hercule Poirot's calm presence seemed to intensify the unease. His eyes, sharp and unrelenting, moved over the assembled company.
Key to the silver box has been found, and with it, new questions arise. This key, hidden in the conservatory, suggests a deliberate act. Someone wished it to remain undiscovered. But why? And what does the box contain that is worth killing for? Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, seated in her usual high-backed chair, gripped the arms tightly, her knuckles white. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice strained, "I've told you. The box contains only family mementos, letters, perhaps a locket. It's of no consequence to anyone but me." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as skepticism. "And yet, madame, your niece died clutching it. The scratches on the lock suggest someone tried to open it. Was it Mademoiselle Price? Or her killer?" A murmur rippled through the group. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his face flushed, rose to his feet. "This is nonsense, Poirot. You're chasing shadows. Eleanor was a foolish girl, meddling in things she didn't understand. Perhaps she crossed someone outside the family, a creditor, a spurned lover." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A lover, monsieur? An interesting theory. Did Mademoiselle Price have such entanglements?" Sir Reginald faltered, his bluster fading. I don't know. She was headstrong, always talking about her independence. She might have." Clara Ashbourne, her voice barely audible, spoke up. "Eleanor was private. She didn't share such things with me, but she was unhappy, I could tell. She argued with someone recently. I heard raised voices in the garden a few days ago." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Raised voices, madame? With whom?" Clara's eyes widened, as if realizing she'd said too much. I couldn't see. It was dark, and I was in the library. I only heard her voice, sharp and angry." Hastings scribbled the detail, his mind racing. Poirot turned to Vivienne Laurent, whose dark eyes gleamed with a mix of amusement and caution. "Mademoiselle Laurent, you were in the conservatory last night, admiring the orchids. Did you see this key? Or perhaps you heard something in the garden?" Vivienne's smile was calculated. "Non, Monsieur Poirot. The conservatory is a world of its own, full of beauty, not secrets. I heard nothing, saw nothing." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "the key was found among your orchids. A coincidence, perhaps." Vivienne's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Coincidences happen, monsieur. I had no reason to hide a key." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to Ernest Whitby. Solicitor's nervous glance toward Lady Beatrice. The detective's next move was to produce the manor's floor plan, spreading it across a table. "Let us consider the geography of the crime," he said. "The back stairs. They are a quiet route to the east wing. Monsieur Whitby, Mademoiselle Laurent, both of you were near this path. And the conservatory. It is not far from the garden where Madame Ashbourne heard voices." Dr. Malcolm Everett, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice cool. "You're suggesting one of us planted the key, Monsieur Poirot. That's a bold accusation." "Not an accusation, Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot replied, "but an observation. The key was hidden, and the box was coveted. We must ask why Poirot excused the group, asking them to remain in their rooms until dinner, and beckoned Hastings to the library. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, pacing the room. "The lies, they multiply. The box, the key, the voices in the garden. These are not separate threads, but part of a single tapestry. We must find the pattern." Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. "Clara's mention of an argument in the garden. It's new. Could it be connected to the note Eleanor wrote?" "Précisément," Poirot said. "The note, 'Meet me at 8:30. We must settle this tonight,' suggests a confrontation. And the voices Madame Ashbourne heard, they confirm it. But who was Eleanor meeting and why?" They returned to Eleanor's room, where Poirot examined the silver box once more. He inserted the key, and with a soft click, the lid sprang open. Inside was a single item, a folded letter, its edges yellowed with age. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the elegant script. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "this is no mere memento." The letter, dated 20 years prior, was addressed to Lady Beatrice's late husband, Lord Ashbourne. It spoke of a hidden scandal, a secret marriage, a child born out of wedlock, and a fortune tied to the Ashbourne estate. The signature was illegible, but the implications were clear. "This letter," Poirot said, "it is a motive for murder. It threatens the family's legacy." Hastings' eyes widened. "You think Eleanor found this and confronted someone?" "Oui," Poirot said. "But who? And why was the box in her possession?" They returned to the drawing room, where the butler had discovered another clue. A torn scrap of fabric caught on a rose bush in the garden, near the conservatory. The fabric, a deep crimson, matched the shade of Vivienne Laurent's evening gown. Poirot held it up, his voice calm but piercing. "Mademoiselle Laurent, this was found in the garden, where voices were heard. Care to explain?" Vivienne's composure cracked. Orchids. The room fell silent, the guests exchanging uneasy glances. Lady Beatrice's face was ashen, and Sir Reginald's fists clenched. Clara's handkerchief was now a shredded ruin, and Dr. Everett's eyes narrowed, as if calculating his next move. Whitby's pen scratched furiously, betraying his nerves. Poirot dismissed the group, but not before issuing a warning. "The truth, it is like the rain outside. It cannot be stopped. If you know something, speak now, or the consequences will be severe." As the guests dispersed, Hastings felt the weight of the new revelations. The letter, the fabric, the voices in the garden, they pointed to a web of secrets that Eleanor had stumbled upon. Poirot, however, remained serene, his mind a whirl of connections. "Hastings," he said softly, "the lies are crumbling. The letter in the box, it is the heart of this crime. But we must tread carefully. The killer is watching." The rain continued, and Blackthorn Manor seemed to pulse with hidden truths. Hastings knew that Poirot's relentless pursuit of detail was closing in on the murderer, and the next revelation would bring them one step closer to the shocking truth. Chapter 8. The emotional turning point. The rain had softened to a mournful drizzle by late afternoon.
its gentle patter a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing within Blackthorn Manor. The drawing room, bathed in the dim glow of oil lamps, felt like a stage where the final act was about to unfold. Captain Hastings stood near the window, his notebook heavy with the weight of accumulating clues. The silver box, its hidden letter revealing a family scandal, the crimson fabric in the garden, and the mysterious voices heard by Clara Ashbourne. The air was thick with suspicion, and the guests, gathered once more, seemed to teeter on the edge of revelation. Hercule Poirot, his neat figure poised by the fireplace, surveyed the room with eyes that gleamed like polished steel, his mind weaving the threads of evidence into a pattern only he could see. The discovery of the letter in the silver box, a document hinting at a secret marriage and a hidden heir, had shifted the investigation, exposing motives rooted deep in the Ashbourne family's past. Poirot held the letter aloft, its yellowed paper catching the light. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice calm but resonant, "this letter is no mere memento. It speaks of a secret that threatens the legacy of Blackthorn Manor. Mademoiselle Price died, clutching the box that held it. Why? And who knew of its contents?" Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, her face pale as porcelain, gripped the arms of her chair. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "that letter is private, a relic of my late husband's past. Eleanor had no business with it. She must have found it by chance."
Conservatory. This suggests intent, not accident. Tell me, did Mademoiselle Price confront you about this letter? Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, her composure cracked. She asked questions, she admitted, her voice breaking. A few days ago she came to me, saying she'd found papers in the library. She was angry, said the family had secrets that needed airing. I begged her to let it be, but she was so stubborn. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling over the group. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his face flushed, slammed his fist on the table. Eleanor was always meddling. She had no right to dig into our affairs. But murder? That's madness. Poirot's gaze shifted to Sir Reginald. Madness, monsieur, or desperation? The letter threatens the estate's inheritance. Who stands to lose if its contents were revealed? Sir Reginald's eyes widened. But before he could respond, Clara Ashbourne let out a choked sob. "Stop it!" she cried, her handkerchief falling to the floor. "You're tearing us apart. Eleanor was my niece too. I loved her, but she was reckless. She pushed people too far." Hastings' pen paused, his heart racing at Clara's outburst. Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle but probing. "Madame Ashbourne, you heard voices in the garden, an argument involving Mademoiselle Price. Was it about this letter? And who was with her?" Clara's hands trembled, her eyes darting to her husband. I don't know. It was dark and I was in the library. I only heard her voice, raised and angry. I thought it was a private matter, so I didn't interfere." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, madame, you did not mention this until pressed. Why?" Clara's tears spilled over. "I was afraid. I didn't want to believe anyone here could do this. But Eleanor was so determined, always stirring things up. I thought she'd bring trouble, but not this." The emotional weight of her words hung in the air, and Hastings noted the reactions of the others. Dr. Malcolm Everett's face remained impassive, though his fingers stilled their restless tapping. Vivian Laurent's smile had vanished, her eyes watchful and guarded. Ernest Whitby's pen scratched furiously, as if to distance himself from the unfolding drama. Poirot turned to Vivienne, holding up the scrap of crimson fabric. "Mademoiselle Laurent, this fabric, it matches your gown. It was found in the garden. near where voices were heard. And the key to the box was found in the conservatory, where you claim to have been. Can you explain? Vivian's composure wavered, her voice sharp. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot. Heard suggest a confrontation. Were you part of it? Vivian's eyes flashed. No, I am an actress, not a murderer. Eleanor was nothing to me. Poirot nodded, but his silence spoke volumes. He turned to Ernest Whitby, whose nervous fidgeting had intensified. Monsieur Whitby, you were working on estate documents. Did these include matters of inheritance? Matters that Mademoiselle Price might have uncovered? Whitby's spectacles glinted as he shook his head. No, Monsieur Poirot. My work was routine. Taxes, maintenance costs. Nothing to do with that letter. And yet, Poirot said, you were near the East Wing, fetching water. Did you see Mademoiselle Price, perhaps with someone else? Whitby's face paled. I saw no one, I swear it. Poirot dismissed the group, asking them to remain in their rooms until dinner, and beckoned Hastings to the library. Hastings, mon ami, he said, pacing the room, we have reached a turning point. Madame Ashburn's confession, Madame Clara's tears, these are cracks in the facade. The letter is the heart of this crime, and someone here feared its revelation. Hastings flipped through his notes. Lady Beatrice admitted Eleanor confronted her about the letter. And Clara's outburst. She's hiding something, isn't she? Oui, Poirot said. Her fear is genuine, but her silence is not. She knows more than she says. And Mademoiselle Laurent, her denials are too polished, too perfect. They returned to Eleanor's room, where Poirot examined the letter again. This document, he said, it speaks of a hidden heir, a threat to the Ashburn fortune. Mademoiselle Price, with her stubborn curiosity, uncovered it. But who else knew? And who acted to silence her? A new clue emerged when the butler, clearing the conservatory, found a small gold locket hidden among the orchids, near where the key had been discovered. The locket, engraved with the initials E.P., contained a faded photograph of a young woman resembling Eleanor. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined it. This, Hastings, is another piece of the puzzle. Why hide a locket with the key? And why in the conservatory? They returned to the drawing room, where Poirot confronted the group with the locket. This was found where the key was hidden, he said, holding it up. It bears Mademoiselle Price's initials. Who placed it there? Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. That locket, it was my mother's. Eleanor wore it sometimes, as a keepsake. How did it end up in the conservatory? The question hung unanswered, and the guests' faces revealed a spectrum of emotions. Shock, fear, and be grave. As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with unease, Hastings felt the weight of the moment, Clara's tears, Lady Beatrice's confession, and the hidden locket had cracked the surface of the mystery, revealing a web of lies and hidden motives. Poirot, his mind a whirl of connections, seemed almost serene, his little gray cells poised to unravel the final threads of deception. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The drizzle outside Blackthorn Manor had dwindled to a faint mist, but the oppressive atmosphere within the estate had only thickened. The drawing room, lit by the soft glow of oil lamps, felt like a stage where the final act of a grim drama was about to unfold. Captain Hastings stood near the door, his notebook now a chronicle of mounting tensions and revelations, the letter in the silver box hinting at a hidden heir, the crimson fabric in the garden, the voices heard by Clara Ashbourne, and the gold locket found with Eleanor Price's initials. Each clue tightened the web of suspicion, and Hercule Poirot, standing by the fireplace with his hands clasped behind his back, seemed to hold the threads of the mystery in his meticulous grasp. His eyes, bright and unyielding, scanned the assembled guests, who sat in a state of restless anticipation. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne's composure was a fragile veneer, her hands trembling as they clutched her pearls. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's earlier bluster had given way to a brooding silence, his gaze fixed on the floor. Clara Ashbourne, her face pale and tear-streaked, twisted a fresh handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Malcolm Everett maintained his clinical calm, though a faint tension in his jaw betrayed his unease. Vivienne Laurent, the actress, sat with a studied grace, her dark eyes watchful, as if measuring every word. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, clutched his notebook, his spectacles glinting as he avoided Poirot's gaze. Poirot stepped forward, his voice clear and commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we approach the heart of this tragedy. Mademoiselle Price was murdered, not by chance, but by design. The letter in the silver box, the key hidden in the conservatory, the locket with her initials, these are not accidents. They point to a secret someone would kill to protect. Tonight, I shall lay a trap to uncover the truth." A murmur of unease rippled through the group. Sir Reginald's head snapped up. "A trap? What nonsense is this, Poirot? Just tell us who did it and be done with it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of amusement. "Patience, monsieur. The truth, it reveals itself only when the guilty feel the pressure. I propose a simple experiment. We shall gather in this room after dinner, and I shall open the silver box once more, in your presence. Perhaps its contents will provoke a reaction." Lady Beatrice's face drained of color. "Monsieur Poirot, the letter is private. Surely there's no need to air family matters publicly." Poirot's smile was polite but firm. "Madame, a murder has been committed."
The conservatory, engraved with E.P. It belonged to Mademoiselle Price, oui? Yet it was hidden with the key. Who placed it there, and why? Lady Beatrice's voice was barely audible. "It was my mother's locket, passed to Eleanor. She wore it often. I don't know how it ended up in the conservatory." Vivienne Laurent leaned forward, her tone sharp. "You keep suggesting I had something to do with it, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the conservatory, yes, but I didn't hide anything. Someone is trying to frame me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Frame you, mademoiselle? An interesting choice of words. The crimson fabric, matching your gown, was found in the garden. The key and locket were in the conservatory. These are not coincidences, they are arrows pointing to the truth." Dr. Everett spoke, his voice cool. "You're building a case on assumptions, Monsieur Poirot. The fabric could belong to anyone, and the locket might have been dropped by accident." "Accident?" Poirot said softly. "Non, Monsieur le Docteur. In murder, there are no accidents. The locket, the key, the letter, they were placed with purpose. And tonight, we shall see who flinches." Poirot dismissed the group, instructing them to gather after dinner, and beckoned Hastings to the library. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, pacing the room, "the trap is set. The guilty one, they will feel the pressure of the box being opened. We must watch their faces, their hands, their eyes. The truth, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures." Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. "You think the killer will reveal themselves when you open the box? But what if it's a bluff?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A bluff, perhaps, but a calculated one. The letter threatens the Ashbourne legacy. Someone here fears its exposure, someone with a motive tied to the estate or to the secret it holds." They returned to Eleanor's room, where Poirot examined the locket once more. Its gold surface was scratched, as if it had been forcibly removed. "This locket," he murmured, "it was not dropped by accident. It was hidden, perhaps to divert suspicion.
But to whom? A new clue emerged when the butler, tidying the East Wing corridor, found a small vial under a rug near Eleanor's room. The vial, empty but smelling faintly of bitter almonds, suggested cyanide, a poison that could have been used to incapacitate Eleanor before the fatal stab. Poirot's eyes lit up as he examined it. This, Hastings, changes the picture. The stab wound was precise, but perhaps it was not the first act. The poison, it may have weakened her, making the murder easier. They returned to the drawing room, where dinner was a tense affair, the guests barely touching their food. Poirot announced that the box would be opened at 9 o'clock. Precisely when Eleanor's scream had been heard.
The reactions. Lady Beatrice's hands trembled. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Everett's fingers stilled. Vivian's smile faded, and Whitby's pen scratched nervously. At 9, the group gathered in the drawing room, the silver box placed on a table at the center. Poirot held the key, his movements deliberate. "Mes amis," he said, "the moment of truth approaches. The letter inside this box holds a secret that cost Mademoiselle Price her life. Let us see what it reveals." He inserted the key, the lock clicking softly. The room was silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the faint patter of rain. As Poirot lifted the lid, revealing the letter, a stifled gasp broke the silence. Hastings' eyes darted to Clara Ashburn, whose hand flew to her mouth, her face ashen. Sir Reginald's fists clenched, and Vivian's eyes narrowed, as if bracing for a blow. Poirot read the letter aloud, its words echoing in the room. A secret marriage, a hidden heir, a fortune tied to the Ashburn estate. "This," he said, "is why Mademoiselle Price died. Someone here feared the truth it holds." Clara Ashburn burst into tears, her voice choked. "It's too much. I can't bear it. Eleanor found that letter, and she wouldn't let it go. She said it would change everything." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "Madame, what did she mean? Who did she threaten with this letter?" Clara shook her head, sobbing. "I don't know. She spoke to me in confidence, said she'd found proof of a scandal. She wanted to confront someone. I begged her to stop, but she wouldn't listen." The room erupted in murmurs, and Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Merci, madame. Your words bring us closer to the truth, but the trap is not yet sprung. We shall reconvene tomorrow, and I urge you to reflect. The killer is among us, and they cannot hide forever." As the guests dispersed, their faces etched with fear and suspicion, Hastings felt the tension peak. Clara's confession had cracked the mystery wide open, and the vial of poison suggested a deeper layer of calculation. Poirot, his mind a whirl of connections, whispered, "The trap is working, Hastings. The guilty one is nervous. Tomorrow, we shall see who breaks." Chapter 10. The Reveal. The mist outside Blackthorn Manor had thickened by the evening of the second day, shrouding the estate in a ghostly veil that seemed to mirror the secrets within. The drawing room, illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps, was a stage set for the climax of Hercule Poirot's investigation. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his notebook brimming with clues. The silver box, the letter revealing a hidden heir, the crimson fabric, the locket,
At the center of the room, the silver box and its key on a table before him, the letter, now a silent witness to the crime. The guests sat in a tense semicircle. Lady Beatrice Ashburn's composure was a fragile shell, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sir Reginald Ashbourne's brooding silence had deepened, his eyes fixed on the floor. Clara Ashburn, her face pale and tear-streaked, clutched a handkerchief, her earlier outburst still echoing in the room. Dr. Malcolm Everett's clinical detachment was strained, his fingers no longer tapping, but rigid. Vivian Laurent's studied charm had faded,
her dark eyes watchful and guarded. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, gripped his notebook, his spectacles glinting with nervous energy. Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. Mesdames et messieurs, we have reached the moment of truth. Mademoiselle Eleanor Price was murdered, not by chance, but by a hand driven by fear and desperation. The clues, the letter, the key, the locket, the poison, have led us here. Tonight, I shall reveal the story of her death, step by step, and the one who wielded the fatal blow. A collective intake of breath followed, and Hastings' pulse quickened. Poirot held up the letter from the silver box. This document, he said, speaks of a secret marriage, a hidden heir, and a fortune tied to the Ashbourne estate. Mademoiselle Price discovered it, and her curiosity led to her death. But let us reconstruct the events of that fatal night. He paced slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. Dinner ended at 8. Mademoiselle Price retired to her room, clutching the silver box, which she had taken from the dining room. Why? Because she had found the letter and knew its significance. She wrote a note. Meet me at 8:30. We must settle this tonight. And arranged a meeting with someone she believed was connected to the secret. Poirot turned to Clara Ashbourne, whose tears had begun anew. Madame, you admitted Mademoiselle Price confided in you about the letter. She spoke of confronting someone. I believe that someone was in this room. Clara's sob broke the silence. I told her to let it go. She wouldn't listen. She said the truth had to come out. Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Vivienne Laurent. Mademoiselle Laurent, the key to the box was found in the conservatory, where you claimed to be. The crimson fabric, matching your gown, was found in the garden, where voices were heard. You denied involvement, but the clues point to you. Vivienne's eyes flashed. You accuse me, Monsieur Poirot? I had no reason to harm Eleanor. Not yet, Poirot said softly. But let us continue. The vial of cyanide, found near Eleanor's room, suggests she was poisoned first, weakened to ensure the stab wound would be fatal. The letter opener, precise and deadly, required knowledge, perhaps medical, perhaps military. He turned to Dr. Everett and Sir Reginald.
Have the skill to strike such a blow. Monsieur Ashburn, your military training gives you similar precision, yet your alibis align, too perfectly, perhaps. Sir Reginald's face reddened. This is outrageous! I was in the billiard room with Everett. We, Poirot said. But the decanter in the billiard room was untouched. You did not drink, as you claimed. One of you left, briefly, to meet Mademoiselle Price. Poirot's gaze settled on Ernest Whitby. Monsieur Whitby, you were near the east wing fetching water. Your path took you close to Eleanor's room. And your work on the estate's finances. Did it reveal the letter's implications? Whitby's hands trembled. I knew nothing of the letter. My work was routine. Poirot raised a hand for silence. Let us piece it together. Mademoiselle Price, armed with the letter, confronted someone at 8:30. An argument ensued, perhaps in the garden, where voices were heard. The killer, fearing exposure, poisoned her with cyanide, weakening her. They then entered her room, staged the open window to suggest an intruder, and stabbed her with the letter opener, ensuring her silence. The locket, torn from her neck, was hidden with the key to divert suspicion. He paused, his eyes locking onto Lady Beatrice. Madame Ashbourne, you knew of the letter's contents. You begged Eleanor to let it be. But when she persisted, did you act to protect the family's legacy? Lady Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. No, I loved Eleanor. I would never harm her. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was relentless. Then let us consider the true killer. The clues, the fabric, the key, the locket, point to Mademoiselle Laurent. But they are too obvious, too convenient. No, the killer is one who has hidden in plain sight. Their alibi crafted with care. He turned to Dr. Everett, whose composure faltered. Monsieur le Docteur, you were not in the billiard room the entire time. You left briefly to meet Mademoiselle Price. She confronted you about the letter, which revealed your connection to the hidden heir, your mother perhaps, or a secret you could not afford to expose. You poisoned her, then stabbed her to ensure her silence, staging the scene to implicate Mademoiselle Laurent. Everett's face paled, his voice sharp. "This is absurd! You have no proof!" Poirot held up the vial. "This cyanide. It is a physician's tool, and the scuff mark in Eleanor's room, made by a shoe with a slight heel, your shoes, monsieur, match this description. The locket, hidden with the key, was a clumsy attempt to shift blame." The room was silent, the guests frozen. Everett rose, his voice trembling. "You're wrong, Poirot. I cared for Eleanor as a patient. I had no motive." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "But you did, succeeded. But the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot, they do not fail." Everett's composure crumbled, his hands shaking. I didn't mean to kill her. She wouldn't stop. She threatened to ruin everything." The room erupted in gasps. Clara sobbed, Sir Reginald roared, and Lady Beatrice buried her face in her hands. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "The police will arrive tomorrow, Monsieur Everett. You will answer for your crime. The truth, it is revealed." As the guests dispersed, stunned and shaken, Hastings felt the weight of the revelation. Poirot's trap had worked, exposing Everett's guilt through the pressure of the clues and the letter's truth. The manor, once a prison of secrets, now stood exposed, its shadows banished by Poirot's relentless logic. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The mist outside Blackthorn Manor had begun to lift by the morning of the third day, revealing patches of pale sky that hinted at the storm's retreat. Inside, the drawing room was quiet, the air heavy with the aftershock of Dr. Malcolm Everett's confession. The revelation of his guilt in Eleanor Price's murder had left the guests subdued, their faces etched with a mix of relief and lingering unease. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his notebook now a testament to the intricate puzzle Hercule Poirot had unraveled. The silver box, the letter, the crimson fabric, the locket, the vial of poison, all had pointed to Everett, whose carefully constructed alibi had crumbled under Poirot's relentless logic. Yet as the manor settled into an uneasy calm, Hastings sensed that Poirot's work was not quite complete. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small figure immaculate in his tailored suit, his moustache perfectly waxed despite the tumultuous events. His eyes, bright and reflective, surveyed the room with a quiet satisfaction, though a trace of melancholy lingered in his expression. The guests, gathered once more, sat in silence. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne's composure had returned, though her eyes were red from sleeplessness. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his bluster extinguished, stared into the fire, his hands clasped tightly. Clara Ashbourne's tears had dried, but her face was pale, her handkerchief a crumpled relic of her distress. Vivienne Laurent, her charm subdued, sat with a thoughtful air, as if reassessing her role in the drama. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, scribbled notes, though his pen moved more slowly now, as if the weight of the truth had dulled his usual fervor. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft but resonant. "The tragedy of Mademoiselle Price's death has been resolved. The murderer, Dr. Everett."
Murder, mes amis, is never a simple act. It is born of fear, greed, or desperation. In this case it was fear. Fear of a secret that threatened to upend a legacy. The letter in the silver box, it spoke of a hidden heir, a truth that Dr. Everett could not allow to surface. Mademoiselle Price, with her stubborn curiosity, uncovered this secret and paid the ultimate price. Lady Beatrice's voice trembled as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, I should have stopped her. If I had been firmer, perhaps she would still be alive. Poirot's gaze softened. Madame, you cannot blame yourself. The heart of Mademoiselle Price was bold, her spirit unyielding. She sought the truth, and in doing so, she exposed a lie that could not remain hidden. Hastings, listening intently, noted the philosophical tone in Poirot's voice. It was a familiar ritual, the moment when Poirot, having solved the case, turned his mind to the deeper truths it revealed. He turned to Sir Reginald, whose silence was heavy. Monsieur Ashburn, you loved your niece, yet you clashed with her. Her defiance challenged your sense of tradition, no? Sir Reginald nodded, his voice gruff. She was headstrong, always questioning. I thought she was trouble, but I never wished her harm, Poirot continued, turning to the trembling woman. You heard her argue in the garden, yet you kept silent. Your fear protected the guilty, but it also protected your heart. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I was weak, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't want to believe anyone here could do such a thing. Poirot's gaze shifted to Vivienne Laurent, whose dark eyes met his with a newfound respect. Mademoiselle Laurent, the clues pointed to you, the fabric, the key, the locket. Yet you were innocent, a pawn in the killer's attempt to mislead. Your presence, it added, drama to the stage, no? Vivienne's lips curved into a faint smile. A stage, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps. But I'm glad to be innocent, even if I played a part. Finally, Poirot turned to Ernest Whitby, whose nervous scribbling had ceased. Monsieur Whitby, your work on the estate's finances placed you close to the truth. Yet you too were a bystander, caught in the web of secrets. Whitby adjusted his spectacles, his voice quiet. I only wanted to serve Lady Beatrice. I knew nothing of the letter until it was too late. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. The truth. It is a delicate thing, mes amis. It hides in the shadows, but it cannot resist the light of logic. The little grey cells, they see what the heart conceals. Mademoiselle Price died because she dared to seek that truth, and it is for her that we must honor it. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. This manor, it is a place of beauty and tradition, but also of secrets. The letter in the silver box, it will be for the courts to decide. Too long, grow dangerous. Hastings felt a pang of admiration for his friend's clarity. Poirot's ability to distill the chaos of human motives into a coherent narrative was nothing short of genius. Yet, as always, there was a humility in his reflection, a recognition of the tragedy beneath the triumph. Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. Mon ami, you have been my faithful companion, as always. Your notes, they have preserved the details that led us to the truth. But now it is time for Poirot to depart. Hastings frowned, sensing the finality in his friend's tone. You're leaving already, Poirot? The police haven't even arrived. Poirot smiled faintly. The police, they will handle the formalities. My work here is done. The truth is revealed, and the guilty will face justice. But I confess, Hastings, these cases, they weigh on the heart. I shall return to the village inn, and perhaps enjoy a tisane in peace. As the guests dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and sorrow, Poirot gathered his coat and hat. Lady Beatrice approached, her voice soft. Monsieur Poirot, how can I thank you? You've brought justice to Eleanor, even if it breaks my heart. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, justice is its own reward, but guard your secrets more carefully in the future, no? They have a way of escaping. He turned to Hastings, his eyes twinkling. Come, mon ami. The roads are clearing and the world awaits. But first, a little rest for the little grey cells. As they stepped into the misty morning, the manor looming behind them, Hastings felt the weight of the case lift, replaced by a quiet awe. Poirot's genius had once again unravelled a tapestry of deception, revealing not just a murderer, but the fragile humanity beneath. The truth had been served, and Blackthorn Manor, though scarred, could begin to heal. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Past.
The mist that had cloaked Blackthorn Manor for days was finally dissipating, revealing the Devon countryside in muted shades of green and gold. Inside, the drawing room retained its air of sombre elegance, though the tension that had gripped the guests was now tinged with resignation. The revelation of Dr. Malcolm Everett's guilt in Eleanor Price's murder had brought a measure of closure, but the scars of the tragedy lingered. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his notebook a chronicle of the intricate puzzle Hercule Poirot had so masterfully solved. The silver box, the letter, the crimson fabric, the locket, and the vial of poison had all pointed to Everett, whose confession had exposed a motive rooted in a long-buried secret. Yet as the morning unfolded, Hastings sensed that Poirot was not entirely ready to close the case. Poirot stood near the fireplace, his neat figure as impeccable as ever. His moustache
Sat in a subdued silence. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne, her composure restored but fragile, clutched a cup of tea, her eyes distant.
Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his earlier fury spent, stared at the floor, his hands clasped tightly. Clara Ashbourne, though no longer weeping, seemed diminished, her handkerchief a constant companion. Vivienne Laurent's charm had softened, her dark eyes thoughtful rather than guarded. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, scribbled in his notebook, though his movements were mechanical, as if grappling with the aftermath. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice calm but resonant.
Mesdames et messieurs,
He began, the truth of Mademoiselle Price's murder has been revealed, and Dr. Everett will face justice. But there is more to this tragedy than the act itself. The letter in the silver box, it is not merely a motive. It is a window into the past, a past that shaped the present. Today, we shall explore its echoes. Lady Beatrice stirred, her voice soft. Monsieur Poirot, must we dwell on it? The letter has caused enough pain. Let it be buried with Eleanor. Poirot's gaze was gentle but firm. Madame, the truth, once uncovered, cannot be buried. The letter speaks of a secret marriage and a hidden heir, a scandal that threatened the Ashbourne legacy. Mademoiselle Price's curiosity uncovered it, but she was not the first to know, was she? Lady Beatrice's hands trembled, and she set her cup down. My husband, he kept many secrets. I knew of the letter, but I thought it was forgotten, locked away in that box. I never imagined it would lead to this. Poirot nodded, turning to the group. The past, mes amis, it has a way of reaching into the present. Dr. Everett acted to protect a claim tied to that letter, a claim to the estate, perhaps through his mother, who was named in the document. But let us consider, who else knew of this secret? Sir Reginald's head snapped up. Are you suggesting there's more to this, Poirot? Everett confessed. The case is closed. Oui, monsieur, Poirot said, but a confession does not erase the ripples of a crime. The letter, it was known to others, no? Madame Clara, you heard voices in the garden, an argument involving Mademoiselle Price. Was it only Dr. Everett she argued with? Clara's eyes widened, her voice barely audible. I don't know. I heard her voice, angry, but I couldn't make out the other. I thought it was a private matter.
Passionate. She spoke of secrets, of wanting to right wrongs. But she didn't share details with me. I wish she had. Poirot's gaze shifted to Ernest Whitby, whose pen had stilled. Monsieur Whitby, Your work on the estate's finances placed you close to its secrets. Did you know of the letter, or of the heir it named? Whitby's face paled, his spectacles glinting. I knew of rumors, old family disputes, but the letter? No, I only learned of it when you opened the box. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. The past, it leaves echoes, letters, lockets, secrets whispered in the dark. Mademoiselle Price heard those echoes and sought to bring them to light. Her courage cost her life. But it has also freed this house from its burden. Hastings, listening intently, felt a pang of admiration for Poirot's ability to weave the case into a broader tapestry of human nature. The detective's reflections were not just about the crime, but about the frailties that drove it. Poirot beckoned Hastings to the library, where they could speak privately. "Hastings, mon ami," he said, pacing the room. "This case, it reminds me others, a secret buried, a family divided, a truth that destroys. The letter was the spark, but the fire was lit by fear." Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. "Do you think there's more we missed?" "Someone else involved?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not involved, perhaps, but complicit in silence." The Ashbournes, they knew of the letter's existence, even if not its full contents. Their silence allowed Everett to act. But the truth, it is out now, and it will shape their future. A soft knock interrupted them. The butler entered, his face grave. "Monsieur Poirot, the police have arrived." "The roads are clear, and they wish to speak with you." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "Merci. The formalities, they must be observed. But the work of Poirot is complete." As they returned to the drawing room, the police, a stern inspector and 2 constables, were already questioning Dr. Everett, who sat handcuffed, his face a mask of resignation. Poirot briefly recounted the case, detailing the clues and Everett's confession. The inspector nodded, impressed. "You've done fine work, Monsieur Poirot. We'll take it from here." Poirot bowed slightly. "The truth, it is my only reward. But I ask that you handle the letter with care. It is a delicate matter for the Ashbourne family." As the police led Everett away, Lady Beatrice approached Poirot, her voice soft. "Monsieur Poirot, how can we move forward?" "The letter, it changes everything." Poirot's loomed behind them, its secrets now laid bare. Hastings felt a quiet awe at Poirot's genius, but also a sense of closure. The echoes of the past had been heard, and the truth, as Poirot had promised, had set Blackthorn Manor free. Chapter 13. The Weight of Truth. The morning sun broke through the last remnants of mist, casting a golden glow over Blackthorn Manor and softening the stark outlines of its gray stone facade. The estate, though still steeped in the somber aftermath of Eleanor Price's murder, seemed to breathe a little easier, as if the revelation of Dr. Malcolm Everett's guilt had lifted a veil of secrecy. Inside, the drawing room retained its air of faded grandeur, but the tension that had gripped the guests had shifted to a quiet introspection. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his notebook a testament to the intricate web of clues: the silver box, the letter, the crimson fabric, the locket, the vial of poison that Hercule Poirot had unraveled with his characteristic precision. Yet as the police prepared to depart with Everett in custody, Hastings sensed that Poirot's reflections were not yet complete. Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small figure impeccable in his tailored suit, his mustache gleaming under the morning light. His eyes, bright with a mix of satisfaction and melancholy, surveyed the assembled guests with a quiet intensity. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne sat with a fragile dignity, her hands folded in her lap,
her eyes betraying the weight of the family's exposed secrets. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his earlier bluster replaced by a heavy silence, stared at the floor. His shoulders slumped. Clara Ashbourne, her face pale but composed, held a fresh handkerchief, her tears now spent. Vivienne Laurent, her charm tempered by the gravity of the moment, sat with a thoughtful air, her dark eyes fixed on Poirot. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, scribbled in his notebook, though his movements were slow, as if the truth had drained his usual nervous energy. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice soft but resonant. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the murderer of Mademoiselle Price has been unmasked, and justice will take its course. But the truth, it is not truth. It is not merely a matter of guilt or innocence. It is a mirror, reflecting the choices and silences that shape our lives. Today I wish to speak of this mirror, and what it shows us about Blackthorn Manor." Lady Beatrice's lips trembled. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given us justice, but at what cost? The letter. It has torn my family apart. How do we live with such a truth?" Poirot's gaze was compassionate but unwavering. "Madame, the truth, it is a heavy burden."
Reginald stirred, his voice gruff. "A gift? She stirred up trouble, Poirot. If she'd left well enough alone, none of this would have happened." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of gentle reproach. "Monsieur, to leave well enough alone is to let secrets fester." Mademoiselle Price challenged the silence that protected Dr. Everett's motive. His fear of losing a claim to the estate drove him to murder, but it was the silence of others that allowed him to act. Clara Ashbourne's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I should have spoken sooner. I heard her arguing in the garden, but I was afraid. I thought it was nothing, just Eleanor being Eleanor." Poirot turned to her, his eyes kind. "Madame, fear is a powerful force. You heard voices, yet you kept silent, hoping to preserve peace. But peace built on secrets is fragile. Your courage in speaking, even late, helped uncover the truth." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, felt a familiar awe at Poirot's ability to weave human frailties into his analysis. The detective's reflections were not just about the crime, but about the moral weight of truth and silence. Poirot turned to Vivienne Laurent, whose thoughtful expression suggested a newfound respect. "Mademoiselle Laurent, the clues pointed to you, the fabric, the locket, the key. Yet you were innocent, a diversion created by the killer. Your presence, it added complexity to the stage, no?" Vivienne's lips curved into a faint smile. "A stage, Monsieur Poirot? Perhaps, but I am glad to have played no darker role. Eleanor deserved better than this." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Ernest Whitby. "Monsieur Whitby, your work on the estate's finances placed you near the heart of its secrets. You claimed ignorance of the letter, yet your nervousness suggests you sensed its shadow." Whitby adjusted his spectacles, his voice quiet. "I heard rumors of old disputes, but I never saw the letter. I only wanted to serve Lady Beatrice, to keep the estate intact." Poirot's expression softened. "And yet, monsieur, the estate's integrity was built on a lie. The truth, it is painful, but it is the foundation of justice." He paused, addressing the group as a whole. "The letter, it will be for the courts to decide its implications, but I urge you, mes amis, to face the past with courage. Blackthorn Manor is a place of beauty, but also of shadows. Let the light of truth guide you forward." Hastings felt the weight of Poirot's words, a reminder that his friend's genius lay not just in solving crimes, but in understanding their human cost. Poirot beckoned him to the library for a private moment. Hastings, mon ami, he said, pacing the room. This case, it is
Everything for them.
Poirot's eyes gleamed. They will, in time, if they embrace the truth. The letter's secret, a hidden heir, may alter the estate's future, but it is better to face it than to live in fear. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered, his face somber. Monsieur Poirot, the police have taken Doctor. They've asked if you have any final remarks for their report. Poirot shook his head. No, my work is done. The clues have spoken, and the truth is clear. Let them handle the rest. As they returned to the drawing room, Lady Beatrice approached, her voice soft. Monsieur Poirot, you've given us more than justice. You've given us a chance to face our past. How can I thank you? Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, the gratitude of an honest heart is enough. Guard your family, and let the truth be your strength. With that, Poirot gathered his coat and hat, signaling to Hastings that their time at Blackthorn Manor was drawing to a close. As they stepped into the brightening morning, the estate stood behind them, its secrets laid bare. Hastings felt a quiet pride in his friend's work, but also a sense of closure. The weight of truth had been felt, and Blackthorn Manor, though forever changed, could begin to rebuild. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The sun climbed higher over Blackthorn Manor, its rays piercing the last wisps of mist and bathing the estate in a tentative warmth. The Devon countryside stretched out in quiet splendor, but within the manor's walls, the air remained heavy with the aftermath of Eleanor Price's murder and Dr. Malcolm Everett's unmasking. The drawing room, with its polished mahogany and crimson drapes, held a subdued elegance, as if the house itself were mourning. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his notebook a testament to the intricate tapestry of clues. The silver box, the letter, the crimson fabric, the locket, the vial of poison, that Hercule Poirot had woven into a coherent truth. Yet as the police finalized their preparations to depart with Everett, Hastings sensed that Poirot was not entirely ready to leave the case behind. Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small figure impeccable in his tailored suit, his mustache gleaming like a badge of precision. His eyes, sharp yet tinged with a reflective melancholy, surveyed the assembled guests with a quiet intensity. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne sat with a fragile dignity, her hands folded, her face a mask of resolve tempered by sorrow. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his earlier fire extinguished, leaned heavily in his chair, his gaze distant. Clara Ashbourne, her tears spent, clutched a handkerchief, her expression one of quiet resignation. Vivienne Laurent, his usual vigor. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice calm but resonant. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, the tragedy of Mademoiselle Price's death has been resolved, and Dr. Everett will answer for his crime. But a case such as this, it leaves threads that must be tied, questions that linger in the heart. Today, I wish to address these final threads, to ensure that Blackthorn Manor may find peace. Lady Beatrice's voice was soft, almost pleading. Monsieur Poirot, you've done so much already. Is there more to uncover? The letter has caused enough pain. Poirot's gaze was compassionate but firm. Madame, the letter was the spark of this tragedy, but it is not the only thread. The silences, the half-truths, the fears, they wove the web that trapped Mademoiselle Price. We must understand them to prevent further sorrow. He turned to the group, his hands clasped behind his back. The letter in the silver box spoke of a hidden heir, a secret marriage that threatened the Ashbourne legacy. Dr. Everett acted to protect his claim, but others knew of the letter's existence, no? Madame Clara, you heard Mademoiselle Price argue in the garden. Was there another voice you recognized? Perhaps faintly. Clara's hands trembled, her eyes darting to her husband. I wasn't sure. It was dark, and the storm was loud. I thought it was just Eleanor's voice, angry and sharp. I didn't want to believe it was anyone here. Poirot nodded, his tone gentle but probing. And yet, madame, your silence protected someone, perhaps unwittingly. The truth, it requires courage, even when it pains us. Sir Reginald stirred, his voice gruff. Enough, Poirot! You've caught your man. Why keep digging? The family's suffered enough. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of quiet determination. Monsieur, the family suffers because secrets were kept. Mademoiselle Price's courage in seeking the truth cost her life, but it also offers you a chance to rebuild. Let us examine one final detail. He produced the locket, its gold surface scratched, its initials EP glinting in the light. This locket, found in the conservatory with the key, was no accident. It was hidden to mislead, to point suspicion at Mademoiselle Laurent. But why? And by whom? Vivian Laurent's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. You cleared me, Monsieur Poirot, but you keep circling back. Do you think I had a hand in this after all? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Non, mademoiselle. You were a pawn, were in the conservatory, near the garden where voices were heard. Perhaps you saw something, even if you did not realize its significance. Vivian hesitated, then spoke softly. I saw Eleanor in the garden briefly before dinner. She was pacing, muttering to herself. I thought she was upset about family matters. I didn't approach her. Poirot nodded, turning to Ernest Whitby. Monsieur Whitby, your work on the estate's finances placed you close to its secrets. Did you ever suspect a hidden claim, a shadow over the inheritance? Whitby's spectacles glinted as he shook his head. I knew of disputes, old rumors, but nothing concrete. My job was to manage accounts, not unearth scandals. Poirot's expression softened. And yet, monsieur, your presence here, your nervous diligence, suggests you sensed the weight of those rumors. The truth, it leaves its mark. He addressed the group as a whole. The final threads of this case are these. The silences that allowed Dr. Everett to act, the fears that kept the letter hidden, the courage of Mademoiselle Price to challenge them. The estate's future, it will be shaped by how you face these truths. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, felt a familiar awe at Poirot's ability to tie the case's loose ends into a moral framework. The detective's reflections were not just about solving the crime, but about guiding the living toward reconciliation. Poirot beckoned Hastings to the library for a private moment. Hastings, mon ami, he said, pacing the room. This case, it is a reminder that truth is both a weapon and a balm. The letter exposed a wound, but it also offers healing, if the Ashbournes choose it. Hastings frowned, flipping through his notes. Do you think they'll confront the letter's implications? A hidden heir could upend everything. Poirot's eyes gleamed. They must, mon ami. The truth, once revealed, cannot be ignored, but they have the strength to face it, if they choose honesty over silence. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered, his face somber. Monsieur Poirot, the police have completed their interviews and are preparing to leave with Dr. Everett. They thank you for your assistance. Poirot nodded. Merci. My work here is done. The truth has been served, and the rest is for the courts. As they returned to the drawing room, Lady Beatrice approached, her voice soft. Monsieur Poirot, you've given us a path forward, painful though it is.
How can we rebuild after such a loss? Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, rebuild with openness. The letter's truth is yours to face together. Let it strengthen, not divide, your family. With that, Poirot gathered his coat and hat, signaling to Hastings that their time at Blackthorn Manor was at an end. As they stepped into the sunlit morning, the estate stood behind them, its secrets no longer hidden. Hastings felt a quiet,
Also, a sense of hope. The final threads had been tied, and Blackthorn Manor, though scarred, could begin to mend. Chapter 15. The Departure. The sun hung high over Blackthorn Manor, its golden light bathing the Devon countryside in a serene glow that belied the turmoil of the past few days. The estate, with its ivy-clad walls and imposing silhouette, stood as a silent witness to the tragedy of Eleanor Price's murder and the unmasking of Dr. Malcolm Everett. The air was clear now, the mist and storm of fading memory. Yet within the manor's walls the echoes of truth lingered. Captain Hastings stood by the window of the drawing-room, his notebook a complete chronicle of the case. The silver box, the letter revealing a hidden heir, the crimson fabric, the locket, the vial of poison, and the relentless logic of Hercule Poirot, who had woven these clues into a tapestry of justice. As the police prepared to depart with Everett in custody, Hastings sensed that Poirot's final reflections would bring closure to the case. Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small figure as impeccable as ever in his tailored suit, his mustache gleaming with its usual precision. His eyes, bright with a mix of satisfaction and quiet contemplation, surveyed the assembled guests with a calm authority. Lady Beatrice Ashbourne sat with a newfound resolve, her hand steady, her face etched with sorrow but also determination. Sir Reginald Ashbourne, his earlier fire extinguished, sat with a heavy silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Clara Ashbourne, her tears dried, held a handkerchief loosely, her expression one of quiet acceptance. Vivienne Laurent, her theatrical charm now subdued, sat with a thoughtful air, her dark eyes reflecting a respect for Poirot's genius. Ernest Whitby, the solicitor, had set aside his notebook, his spectacles catching the light as he listened intently. Poirot cleared his throat, his voice soft but resonant, carrying the weight of finality. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the tragedy of Mademoiselle Eleanor Price has been resolved. Dr. Everett, driven by fear of a secret revealed, has been unmasked, and justice will follow. But as I prepare to depart Blackthorn Manor, I wish to leave you with a final reflection, not on the crime, but on the truth that binds us all." Lady Beatrice's voice was steady, though tinged with emotion. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given us more than justice. You've given us a chance to face our past. But how do we move forward from such pain?" Poirot's gaze was warm, almost paternal. "Madame, the truth, it is a double-edged sword. It cuts deeply, but it also heals. The letter in the silver box
was trouble, but she didn't deserve this. I wish I'd listened to her, understood her." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "Monsieur, regret is a heavy burden, but it is also a teacher." Mademoiselle Price challenged the silence that protected Dr. Everett's motive. Her defiance was her strength, and it is a lesson for us all. Clara Ashbourne spoke softly, her eyes fixed on Poirot. "I was afraid to speak, Monsieur Poirot. I heard her in the garden, arguing, but I kept silent. If I'd acted, could I have saved her?" Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "Madame, the past cannot be changed, but your courage in speaking, even late, helped uncover the truth.
Do not dwell on what might have been. Honor Mademoiselle Price by living with honesty. Hastings, scribbling the final entries in his notebook, felt a profound admiration for Poirot's ability to blend logic with compassion. The detective turned to Vivienne Laurent, whose thoughtful expression suggested a deeper understanding of the case. Mademoiselle Laurent, you were a pawn in the killer's game. The fabric, the locket, the key, all placed to mislead. Yet your presence added a spark to this drama, no? Vivienne's smile was faint, but genuine. A spark, Monsieur Poirot? Perhaps. But I'm glad to have been merely a player, not the villain. Eleanor's courage. It was inspiring. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he turned to Ernest Whitby. Monsieur Whitby, your work on the estate's finances placed you near its secrets. You sensed their weight, yet you remained loyal. That loyalty, it is a strength. But let it be tempered with openness. Whitby nodded, his voice quiet. I'll remember that, Monsieur Poirot. The truth. It's more important than I realized. Poirot addressed the group as a whole, his voice rising with quiet conviction. Mes amis, Blackthorn Manor is a place of beauty, but also of shadows. The letter's truth, a hidden heir, a legacy in question, will challenge you. But face it together, with courage and honesty, and you will find strength. The little grey cells, they have done their work, but it is your hearts that must carry you forward. Hastings felt the weight of Poirot's words, a reminder that his friend's genius lay not only in solving crimes, but in illuminating the human condition. Poirot beckoned him to the library for a final, private moment. Hastings, mon ami, he said, pacing the room. This case, it is a mirror of life itself, secrets hidden, truths revealed, hearts tested. The letter was the spark, but the fire was lit by human frailty.
Unite. A knock at the door interrupted them. The butler entered, his face somber but respectful. Monsieur Poirot, the police have departed with Doctor. They've left a note of gratitude for your assistance. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. Merci. The formalities are complete. Now, it is time for Poirot to take his leave. As they returned to the drawing room, Lady Beatrice approached, her voice soft but resolute. Monsieur Poirot, you've given us a path through this darkness. We'll face the letter's truth, as a family. Thank you. Poirot bowed, his gesture elegant. Madame, the truth is your guide. Let it lead you to peace. With that, Poirot gathered his coat and hat, signaling to Hastings that their time at Blackthorn Manor was over. As they stepped into the sunlit morning, the estate stood behind them, its secrets laid bare, its future uncertain but hopeful. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose serene expression belied the brilliance of his work. Another case solved, Poirot, he said, a smile tugging at his lips. What now? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Now, mon ami? A tisane, a quiet moment, and perhaps another puzzle for the little grey cells. The world never lacks for mysteries. As they walked down the gravel drive, the manor receding behind them, Hastings felt a quiet triumph. The truth had been served, the guilty unmasked, and Blackthorn Manor, though forever changed, stood on the threshold of renewal. Poirot's genius had prevailed, and the world, as he said, awaited their next adventure.